Palestine, the ethnic cleansing operation carried out by Israeli forces in northern Gaza left 21 people dead early Wednesday morning. Brazilian President Lula da Silva hosted his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping for talks on economy and trade after the two met at the G20 summit in Rio. And in Georgia, police forces expelled demonstrators protesting against the results of the parliamentary elections in the center of Tbilisi city. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Palestine, the ethnic cleansing operation carried out by Israeli forces in northern Gaza left 21 people dead early Wednesday morning. The forces shelled residential areas in Jabalia and Beit Lahia camps, both located in northern Palestine. The number of wounded has not been confirmed, but it is estimated the death toll could rise as 10 people are still missing. Israel has kept a 46-day siege against the north of the Strip. Palestine commemorates World Children's Day amidst Israeli violence, killings, displacement, starvation, and child abuse. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, highlights that Palestinian children are among the most vulnerable victims of war. Indeed, they suffer from devastation, lack of access to health, education, and food. Namely, 96% of Palestinians go through such aggravating conditions daily. The Ministry of Education and Higher Education reported that over 11,000 students have been killed in the Gaza Strip, while at least 19,467 have been injured due to the Zionist ongoing incursion that began in October 2023. And the commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Samuel Paparo, reported that the country's stockpile of weapons is dwindling due to its support for the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. The military commander pointed out that they have provided billions of dollars worth of air defense systems to Ukraine and Israel. Washington has provided more than $60 billion in military assistance to Ukraine, including 3 Patriot anti-aircraft systems with interceptor missiles and more than 40 HIMARS multiple rocket launchers with munitions. On the other hand, the United States is the key supplier of munitions to Israel, a fact that makes the North American nation a main sponsor of the Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people. And the Syrian permanent representative to the United Nations, Qusay al-Dahak, affirmed that Israel is the only obstacle to achieving a Middle East free of weapons of mass destruction. The diplomat considered that the Israeli aggressive conduct and its possession of weapons, especially nuclear weapons, requires a greater effort to establish a zone free of these arms in the Middle East. During his speech at the meeting of the conference to establish a zone free of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, the politician also condemned the protection provided by some Western countries to develop the nuclear, biological, and chemical programs of the Israeli army. And in Russia, the Defense Ministry reported that the army repelled a Ukrainian drone attack involving over 40 drones in 6 regions of the country. Authorities said there were no human casualties or material damage in the attacks. Defense officials pointed out that the Ukrainian troops regularly attack bordering Russian provinces with drones to force the civilian population to leave their homes. Ukrainian forces in recent months have increased drone raids against oil refineries and fuel depots. Also, Russian authorities stressed the importance of reaching the goals of its military operation in Ukraine. The spokesperson of Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, detailed that President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly stated Russia is ready to negotiate possible ways of settling the conflict without neglecting Moscow's goals. In mid-June, Putin formulated several key conditions for starting peace negotiations, namely that Ukraine must withdraw its troops from the Russian territories. Moreover, Kiev must give up from joining NATO, and it must maintain neutral, non-aligned, and non-nuclear status. Russia has been conducting a military operation in Ukraine since February 2022 to defend and safeguard the population from genocide by the Kiev government. U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered anti-personnel mines to be sent to Ukraine, according to the Washington Post. According to the declarations of two officials to the U.S. newspaper, after authorizing the use of ATACMS missiles on Russia, late on Tuesday, the president ordered the sending of anti-personnel mines to Kiev. In this sense, the decision on the missiles had been postponed by the head of state for over a year, to end up approving it less than 2 months after his departure from the government. Allocating anti-personnel mines constitutes a violation of the United Nations Convention, which banned them, in addition to the high international rejection due to the high risk it poses to the civilian population. And representatives of the Russian executive and legislative branches reaffirmed that the U.S. missile strikes on their territory will break off the ties between Washington and Moscow, noting it won't change the current battlefield's reality. The spokesperson of the Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, assured that using the weapons sent by Joe Biden against Russian provinces will just destroy completely the relations between his country and Russia. In fact, the spokesperson of the presidential office, Dmitry Peskov, declared that the line of communication between Washington and Moscow has not been active for a long time. The deputy representative of the Federation to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky, warned that now the response to the United States is no longer in diplomatic hands.
I think we made our position crystal clear, which has been exposed during the past weeks, and it is not an illusion that this step of Ukraine and its Western sponsors is a deliberate escalation. I think there is absolutely no doubt about it. So there are people in Moscow who are responsible for counteracting this kind of threats and attacks, and these people are not diplomats.
Russia's deputy representative to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky, assured that the West knows that militarily they have lost other objectives.
Whatever the West is trying to do to support them, it is losing, and that is an objective reality, and they don't know what to do now. That's why they are trying to reframe their objectives. If at first it was to defeat Russia, to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, now it is to create favorable negotiations for Ukraine. Now they are going to try to pretend that the Ukrainian peace formulas, which are actually ultimatums, irrational ultimatums for Russia, are the only basis for this.
We now have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brazilian President Luis Lula da Silva hosted his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping for talks on economy and trade after the two met at the G20 summit in Rio. President Xi said the state visit seeks to consolidate a robust relationship between the two giants of the Global South. China is Brazil's biggest trading partner overall, with two-way commerce exceeding $160 billion in 2023. The bilateral meeting aims to further enhance China-Brazil relations, promote the synergy of the two countries' development strategies, and address international and regional issues of common interest. The two leaders are expected to sign a series of bilateral agreements and make a joint statement. This year, Brazil and China mark 50 years of diplomatic ties. And this Tuesday, Venezuela presented to Iranian businessmen the investment potential and the exportable products that the country has to offer. During the meeting of the high-level joint commission between Iran and Venezuela held in Caracas, the commission's co-president Ramon Velázquez highlighted the importance of Iranian and Venezuelan businessmen starting to work under a single vision to link the commercial activities of both nations. For her part, the president of Marca País, Daniela Cabello, presented the geographic diversity of the country and emphasized that the economic diversification that the country is experiencing is a product of the work and laborious hands of their country's people. And also, Venezuela's Environment Minister Josué Lorca met on Tuesday with the Secretary General of the Organization of Oil Exporting Countries, Haytham Al-Ghais, on the sidelines of the COP29 summit in Baku. Authorities explained that the officials discussed common points on the climate crisis, evaluated the promotion of technologies to reduce emissions in the oil sector. They also addressed the need to achieve financing goals at the United Nations Conference on Climate Change. in 2024 so that developing countries can face climate challenges. During COP29, companies are expected to commit to reducing emissions and implementing green technologies. In Uruguay, presidential candidates are on the brink of entering onto the election silence period. Earlier, Yamandu Orsi, representing the Broad Front, will lead a mass rally in Las Piedras Canelones department. Orsi, alongside his vice president's running mate Carolina Cose, will partake in a caravan. People will gather at the Legislative Palace to start the march, then they will go through the capital city on their way to Las Piedras. Participants will begin the mass ceremony around 7 p.m. local time. On Friday, November 22nd, sets off the election silence, which bans both proselytism and political propaganda before the runoff on November 24th. Likewise, the Uruguayan presidential candidate for the National Party, Álvaro Delgado, will close his electoral campaign on Wednesday in Montevideo. The closing ceremony of the Republican coalition will take place at the obelisk of the capital at 7 p.m. local time. At the brink of the election silence, the ruling party will seek to convince still undecided voters for the official closing of Delgado's campaign. The presence of the former presidential candidates of the coalitionist parties has been announced. And in Colombia, government authorities and indigenous peoples' representatives reviewed the indigenous chapter of the implementation of the peace accords on the 8th anniversary of the historic event. At the Gabriel Garcia Marquez Cultural Center in Bogota, representatives of the executive, the special high-level instance of indigenous peoples, the common component representatives of the international community, and the United Nations Verification Mission in Colombia, among other organizations, met to examine the progress and challenges the government presented, important achievements that contribute to the guarantee of the rights of indigenous peoples and their participation in the development of the territories of peace, but recognizes that there is still a pending debt. Cuban Vice President Salvador Valdez stated during a meeting with Syrian Ambassador Ghassan Obeid that the Arab nation will always be able to count on Cuba's support and cooperation. The Cuban Vice President ratified that Syria is a brotherly country and highlighted the historic bilateral ties. He also thanked Syria for its support in the struggle of the Caribbean nation against the U.S. blockade and ratified Cuba's willingness to advocate at the international level for the sovereignty of the Arab country to be respected. The Syrian ambassador expressed his country's interest in expanding bilateral cooperation in commercial and economic sectors to confront the unilateral sanctions imposed on both nations.
We feel very satisfied with the stable level of political and diplomatic relations that we have with Syria, a brother country with a long history of diplomatic relations. Next year will be the 60th anniversary of the relationship between Cuba and Syria. And we know how much it is suffering from a war that has been going on for 13 years. We will always be at the side of the Syrian people, supporting each other.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. For our short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Georgia, police forces expelled demonstrators protesting against the results of the parliamentary elections in the center of Tbilisi city. Citizens occupied Shabshabdas Avenue in front of the university after the end of an opposition march in rejection of the parliamentary election results. The police arrived on the scene and forced demonstrators to leave the place. The opposition march denounced the manipulation of the results published by the Central Electoral Commission, which indicated that the ruling Georgian Dream Party obtained 53.93% of the votes and won 89 of the 150 seats in the legislature. In this regard, protesters demand an international investigation, a request that was met by the prosecutor's office after they launched an investigation into the fraud accusations. And in France, the National Federation of Farmers' Unions announced new demonstrations next week to reject the European Union Free Trade Agreement and to demand higher incomes. The French Agricultural Union said that nationwide protests will take place on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, together with the Young Farmers' Union, to denounce the obstacles hindering their work. Both unions resumed demonstrations and road blockades to demand the fulfillment of the 70 measures promised by the government last January. According to the union, the Mercosur agreement will result in a loss of income in the face of imports from countries with lower production costs and fewer environmental regulations. The French meteorological authorities have declared a state of orange alert in 28 departments due to early snowfalls. The measure will be enforced as of Thursday, November 21st, which urges to be cautious and to follow the information issued due to snowfalls and the subsequent formation of dangerous black ice on roads as a result of the passage of the Caetano Depression across the country. According to the forecast, the snowfalls will reach to a lesser or greater extent territories located in the northern portion of the country in a strip that covers from east to west. Due to the unusual weather forecast, even in the middle of fall and 1 month before the official beginning of winter, meteorologists advanced the possibility of extending the alert to other neighboring departments. And in Cuba, this November, Havana celebrates its 505th anniversary with several cultural events. Our colleague Fabiola Lopez with the details.
Besieged by hurricanes and blockades, this amazing Caribbean city refused to stop dancing. So magical were the nights in this capital during the 28th Alicia Alonso International Ballet Festival of Havana. Despite the heavy rains and fierce winds that came with Hurricane Rafael, the dance festival was never suspended, only postponed.
The ballet, although for some countries it is an elitist expression, for Cuba it cannot be, because it has been at the service of the Cuban people since Alicia Alonso gave it validity. To have a figure like Alicia, who gave herself so much to the people, made it impossible for them not to follow her.
This time artists from 15 nations from the 5 continents shared the poetry of the movement.
I loved everything about the beauty of the body and how beautiful it is to move and express art with the body. It was really incredible for me.
In these difficult times for Cuba, I believe that 2 things have come together: the tenacity and validity of the National Ballet of Cuba and the gesture of solidarity of those great artists who have been with us.
The 15th Havana Biennial began with this very Cuban drumming. This is not an elite event that stays in the museums. According to its directors, here art comes into contact with the people and becomes part of their lives.
I think it is a very human biennial. I like biennials like this, where you are not the artist who comes to show off, but you are part of a society, of a community.
Magical things happen here, there's no doubt about it. Everything seems like it's not going to happen, and in the end, I don't know how people get around that eventually make things happen.
The master Juvenal Ravello, one of the most notable kinetic artists of our American continent, invites us to enter the creative universe, where art becomes a vehicle for social transformation. Samia Halabi, pioneer of digital art and abstract painting, returns with the installation reorganizes, constructs. Peruvian Sonia Cunliffe presents Operation Peter Pan, from absence to absence, bringing to life the only remaining mobile cinema truck. Mexican artist Victoria Molina brings State of Uncertainty, this collaborative mural made with the community.
It is necessary to understand that from the culture nothing will be able to separate us. Nothing will be able to finish with our countries, and much less with our peoples, with our people who are built from that beautiful diversity of culture.
These are just some of the many proposals of this biennial, which according to experts, not only aims to showcase the creations of the peoples of the South, but also becomes the ideal place to reflect on how to deal with colonization in the current context.
Fabiola Lopez, teleSUR, La Habana.
We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.